Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to show you how anyone can paint this easy, realistic watercolor broccoli in Procreate. I will show you some of my favorite Procreate watercolor techniques that will bring your stunning realism to your art. Whether you're a beginner or an advanced artist, these tips will help take your work to the next level. You can find the exact brushes and canvases in the description below. The sketch and the color palettes will be available for free. For this demonstration, I will be using the rough texture canvas. So I'm going to start off with coloring the broccoli with a light tone green color, and we're going to paint underneath the watercolor texture canvas effect under the sketch. And we're going to start with our wet on dry brush. And it's important to start with an opacity around 50%. This will create harder edges to begin with and allow the center to be a bit more transparent. And we are going to fill the general area of the broccoli with a light tone color. A quick tip, whenever I start a new painting, I always like to start with the outlining the edges, which helps define the boundaries of the area you want to color. This will provide a clear structure to work with, making it a lot easier to stay within the lines and maintain a neat appearance. And once I'm done with the outline, I could just fill in the area just like this. And we're finished with the light tone colors. Now we're going to move on with adding the midtones. So we're going to create a new layer and then pick a darker tone that we have before. And then we're going to increase the opacity to around 70%. And start off with the left side because the light's coming from the right side. This will create a lot more depth and value to this painting. And we are also going to fill in the top of the broccoli, which is going to be a little bit more darker. So I'm going to put the midtones on the bottom left corner and on top of the broccoli. Again, starting with the edges to have a nice clean appearance. And I will show you a quick demonstration of why I reduced the opacity on the wet on dry brush. As you can see, I made these brushes to have harder edges, but have transparent centers, just like watercolor stain look. But when we reduce the opacity into the wet on dry brush, the center becomes a lot more transparent, but the edges still maintain a hard look. But when I increase the opacity to 100%, the entire stroke is a bit more darker and less transparent. Now we're going to move on with adding the darkest tone color. So we're going to pick a dark tone color and increase the opacity to 100%. And we're just going to fill in the top areas as well, but on the left corner where it's going to be a bit more darker because the light's coming from the right side. Just like this, we're going to fill in the area. And we're going to add some of the darkness at the bottom because the broccoli at the top is coming out, protruding towards us, and a bit more shadow is going to be at the bottom. Now, once all three tones have been completed, we're going to combine the three layers and start blending them using the moving blender. So use your two fingers and pinch the three layers together and they will be combined. And then we're going to pick the moving blender and keep the size to around 30%, and we're going to just wiggle around, moving two pigments at a time, just like this. This allows for smooth blending without smudging. Once the blending process is completed, we're going to move on with adding a little bit more depth around the top of the broccoli. So we're going to create a new layer, and we're going to pick the same dark tone color that we had, and keep the opacity to around 85%, and the size to around 50%. And we're going to fill the areas of the edges where it's going to be a bit more dark, just like this. And there are many reasons why a broccoli is a perfect reference to start with painting, for beginners as well as more advanced artists. Broccoli uses mostly a single tone, allowing the artist to concentrate on the values in the light and the darkness, which is crucial for creating depth and dimension without worrying too much about picking the right color at the right areas. An advanced artist can further refine their understanding and use of value and tone. Now, once this line has been completed, we're going to move on with using the moving blender. And we're going to combine the layers that we created and slightly blend them just like this, allowing it to be a bit more smoother rather than so perfect lines are across the broccoli. It's also very helpful to work in a clockwise or counterclockwise when you're doing such work like this. Now I will show you a technique that I like to use to move dark pigments to light pigments with the realistic watercolor look. So we're going to create a new layer and pick a dark tone color, green color we had before, and use the fine line brush and keep the opacity to around 100% and the size to around 30%. And as you can see, I already made some sketch lines for you guys to follow along, dragging some of the stems down to create more depth and some more shadows here. So just follow along, allowing it to be a bit more involved in the top and dragging it down just like this. And going along the top lines, which will be a bit more darker. And of course, it's going to be more darker when we are going into the left corner. And on the top left corner is going to be a bit darker too as well. And we're going to find some corners of the broccoli where it'll be more darker as well. And once that is completed, we're going to use the regular blender and pull the pigment towards the lighter tone colors. So go to your layers tab and combine the two layers by pinching your fingers just like this. And now choose the size to around 20%. And what we're going to do is we're going to drag some of the pigment that are darker to the light tones, just like this. A nice watercolor texture look that we can see here. And we're going to just go around dragging the pigments from the top to the bottom. And when we get to the top, we're going to create some more shadows here, just like this, where the light will be a bit more darker. And if you are enjoying these tutorials, hit that like button, subscribe to our channels where we create more tutorials for you guys. Now, to create this watercolor stain look that we want, we're going to create a new layer and pick the wet on dry brush again. And as shown you before, we're going to reduce the opacity to around 45 to 40%. This will give you the hard edge, but also giving you that transparent look. And as you can see, I already drew some of the shadows that you want to put in to add some watercolor stain look just like this. The more random it looks with weirder edges, it's going to create a bit more realism of watercolor stain look. So be wild here. And just have fun. And you could also increase the opacity because we are going a bit more darker now. And don't forget to add some of the pigment of the watercolor stain look at the bottom by dragging a little bit downwards towards the bottom of the stem of the broccoli. And as you can see, I added some of the bottom here as well to create some more depth here. Now, the simple technique that I like to use is to add a little bit texture without doing too much, because simplicity is the key. So to do this, we're going to create a new layer, but we're going to reduce the opacity from the layers tab to around 30%. And we're going to pick the rough round brush and pick the dark tone color that we had before. So we're going to add some textures to the top of the broccoli. So we're just going to create lines just like this, like a half moon circle. Just like this, all across the broccoli on the top edges. Simplicity eliminates unnecessary elements, allowing the core message to the subject to stand out. Often, having a clean, elegant look has a visual appealing, especially simple things like a broccoli. Now we're going to add some of the shadows to the bottom left corner. So we're going to create a new layer, but we're going to use the most bottom layer that we have and pick a dark blue tone color and use the wet on dry brush And we're going to reduce the opacity to around 25% and then size to around 100%. And as you can see, I already drew some of the sketch marks for you guys to follow along. The blue and the green really complements each other, and that's why it's so nice to see a shadow at the bottom left corner. Since the broccoli is darker on the closer side of the shadow, we're going to increase the opacity just slightly and draw a slight line closest to the broccoli to create a bit more darker shadow at the bottom. And we can smooth it out by using the moving blender and going around, just slightly wiggling it, mixing the colors together. So there's light coming from the right side, so we're going to add a little bit of reflection of the light on the broccoli. So we're going to pick the gouache layer and pick the whitest tone color that we can find and use the gouache brush. We're going to decrease the opacity to around 30% and keep the size to around 50%. And we're just going to add the top right corners where the light might be reflecting here. And just like this, slightly putting it without overwhelming the broccoli to be too shiny. And a bit of light reflection at the bottom here as well. Now once that is completed, all we have to do is locate the sketch, remove the sketch, and that is it. Beautiful, realistic watercolor broccoli. If you enjoyed this tutorial, I have a lot more tutorials for you guys on my page. You can continue painting with me by clicking on the next video. See you there.